On today's episode, I'm joined by an investigative journalist whose work has appeared in major publications like the New York Times, BBC, and 60 Minutes. He has drawn groundbreaking parallels from powerful conspiracies ranging from the First World Wars to reptilians to prosperity scams and contemporary myths that continue to plague humanity. He's also the author of the brand new book, The Storm is Upon Us. You're gonna want to brace yourselves for this one, guys. So without further ado, here is my conversation with author Mike Rothschild, and this is Uncovering the Truth. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, sure. Let's just get right into it.
All right.
I was looking at a statistic actually before we spoke from the Public Religious Research Institute, and they said 22% of Americans believe a storm is coming. 18% believe violence is necessary to save the country, and 16% believe the media and finance is controlled by satanic worshiping pedophiles. So I think some people may laugh this off, but I interpret this as something very serious and dangerous in our country. And I'm just curious, the title of your book is The Storm is Upon Us. So what is the storm exactly?
Sure. So those numbers sound exactly in line with everything that I've read and everything I've experienced. The number of people who have a barely hidden bloodlust to murder their neighbor for wanting to know their pronouns or voting for Joe Biden is disturbing. And a lot of these people really believe that there is an organized cabal that controls media, finance, government. Now, that's not new. But what is new is this idea of kind of taking it back, of fighting back against it. And that's where the concept of the storm comes in. So the idea of the storm came first from a very bizarre remark that Donald Trump made in early October of 2017. He was standing in the East Room of the White House with a bunch of uniformed military officers and their spouses. And the cameras are kind of clicking away. And he says, you know what this represents? No, tell us, Mr. President. This could be the calm before the storm. Could be the calm before the storm. And of course, everybody's like, what is the storm? What is he talking about? Why would a bunch of military officers be gathering and having dinner with the president be the calm before the storm? Nobody knows what that means. Even Trump doesn't know what it means. He gets asked the next day. He's like, you'll find out. You'll find out. Clearly, this is just things he's saying. But there's a group of people on 4chan who decides that this is part of a game that they can play. And there's this long tradition on 4chan of pretending to be an important person. So there's high-level insider Anon, there's White House Anon, there's FBI Anon. And so they come up with this idea of a military intelligence team called Q that is preparing Americans for the storm. And the storm is going to be the mass arrest of this cabal. The globalist super government that's been running everything for the past 6,000 years. And Donald Trump is finally going to be the one to take it down. And you'll know it's happening because the president is going to tweet, "My fellow Americans, the storm is upon us." And then there will be mass arrests and great upheaval and riots. But then everything's going to be great at the end. It's going to be utopia. You're going to have free energy, free cures for cancer. Everything's going to be awesome. We just have to kill a bunch of people. So that's what the storm is. We're going to kill all the bad people who have escaped justice, and then we're going to live in paradise.
Well, that sounds to me a bit like the Final Solution from 1930, right? The purification. I mean, and let me push back on not push back, but ask you about for those who don't know it, including myself, what is 4chan? And I was reading about 8chan. What is this?
Sure. So one of the things with this book is that I didn't want to assume that people knew anything about any of this, because ideally no one should know anything about this. But unfortunately, you kind of have to. 4chan is an image board that was started by this 15-year-old kid who wanted a place to basically post pictures of anime. And it turned into this sort of cultural meeting point for outsiders. So, for lack of a better term, weirdo kids who liked anime and didn't have a lot of friends, but were really good at the internet, could connect and share this stuff. And it quickly turned into a place where sort of memes were created and urban legends were created. So something like the Slender Man, that started off as a 4chan thing. Rick rolling started off as a 4chan thing. And you're thinking, well, that's okay. I mean, nobody's getting murdered over Rick rolling. But there's a part of 4chan that is extremely toxic. In particular, a board called Pol, P-O-L. Don't go there. Not worth your time. But this is a place where a lot of anti-Semitic memes and conspiracy theories and harassment were generated. This is the place where Gamergate started. So 4chan was the sort of the birthplace of QAnon. It had been where these other Anon accounts had posted, some of them for just a couple of days or for a week. Q showed up on Pol in late October of 2017, claiming that Hillary Clinton was about to be arrested. And that's the claim that really made this stand out from these other accounts. But for a while, this was just some more anonymous posting on a place where you could pretend to be anything and people would just go with it.
Wow. And so it started, and I didn't know that it was in 2017 when the talks about the storm. I only heard about this in 2020. But so to me, it seems, I guess I'm having trouble swallowing that this entire movement was started just on the premise of trying to get Trump elected. Is there more to it? Because, you know, they go after the medical industry, they go after big pharma, they go after election integrity, and they go after other religions. And they including, I know, celebrities as well, like Paul Walker, the actor. You've been talking about him. I thought that we'll get into that maybe later, but is this all for a political movement? And if so, are you telling me that just some people in their basements began a conspiracy that is now engulfed a fifth of the American population?
Well, it's more complicated than that. So with something like QAnon, it exists to pretend that Donald Trump is going to do the things that he said he was going to do. So the people who are on 4chan, they're not like policy wonks. These are not people debating like tax policy and like cap and trade. That's not what this is about. This is about having a good time, trolling, and trying to get noticed. So what made these posts from this account that was initially completely anonymous, and then after a couple of days or maybe a week started calling themselves Q Clearance Patriot. There is an actual Q clearance. It's a Department of Energy term. Just means you read in on certain classified information regarding nuclear power. It's really not that interesting. I know people have Q clearance. It's not like access to where the Holy Grail is. But there was a feeling that like Trump's not doing what he said he was going to do. There's got to be something going on. Like something's got to happen. And the idea that Hillary Clinton was finally going to be brought to justice after 30 years of conspiracy theory. I mean, this is stuff that goes back to the early 90s. This is, Rush Limbaugh and the Clinton crime family. This is, Travelgate, Whitewater. I mean, all this stuff that, for a kid for an 18-year-old kid on the internet in 2017 is like ancient history. But this was very powerful to a much older crowd. So very quickly, Q makes the jump from just some 4chan posts. And if it had just stayed as 4chan posts, we wouldn't be talking about it right now. But it jumped to places like Reddit, it jumped to Twitter, it jumped to YouTube, and you started to see an industry of media coming up about decoding what these posts meant. So you have one of the big influencers I talk about in the book is this guy Praying Medic. This sort of big burly bald dude who claims to have divine healing powers. And he would post YouTube videos about prophetic dream analysis and like how to cure your diabetes with good thoughts and stuff like that. And he'd get like 1,000 views. And then he starts talking about QAnon and he's getting hundreds of thousands of views. So automatically you have this conspiracy movement that is really good at telling people what they want to hear and what they want to be true, but is also really appealing to a demographic that doesn't go to 4chan, that doesn't hang out in places like that. And it's telling people a very specific thing about something these people have wanted to happen for a very long time. So psychologically, it's actually really well constructed. It's very durable. It plays out like a techno thriller. It feels like a Tom Clancy book or a Dan Brown novel. It's very compelling and alluring. And at the end of it, you get the thing that you've wanted to happen for decades. So you can really see why it took off.
And the thing that you get at the end is the storm, correct? Basically the massacre
Yes.
of the deep state,
yes.
and all of the bureaucracies.
Yes,
So,
the legal purging of all these people. And Q makes a big deal out of that. Well, it has to be legal, it has to be done correctly. We have to have all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed. And of course, that's why it never happens, because there's always one more hurdle. There's always one more thing that needs to fall into place, which is very similar to some of these prosperity scams that I'd written about before QAnon, which is how I kind of figured out, oh, this could stick around for a while, because it's a very similar structure, except the thing that you're getting is not a big financial windfall. It's Hillary Clinton's going to get hanged at dawn on Guantanamo Bay, and it's going to be the greatest thing ever. That's a different kind of windfall, but it's a windfall nonetheless.
Oh, wait, could you talk about the prosperity scams? That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah. By the way, you've done so much great work. I was reading your articles. I'm like, there is too much I want to talk to you. But yeah. What's a prosperity scam?
So a prosperity scam it's also called affinity fraud. It's when a trusted person in your community brings a can't miss investment to you, and it turns out they're scamming. So these are very popular in minority communities, expatriate communities, where somebody who is part of this community, speaks the language, understands the customs, but is also a stone cold fraudster. So there was an affinity fraud that started in the early 90s in downstate Illinois. It's called Omega. And it was this guy who was part of this very close-knit Christian community in this town of Mattoon, Illinois, downstate. And he starts talking about how he has access to what he calls prime European banknotes. He's one of 6 people in the world who knows what these are and has access to them. And he's going to help his friends and his church make huge amounts of money off of this. And suddenly all this money starts flooding into Mattoon, Illinois. People are driving around in 100-year-old cars. They're building mega mansions. There are stories of people toting sacks of cash around that are so heavy they rip when you pick them up. This is all a scam. This guy, his name's Clyde Hood. He's like a small-time grifter, bar bouncer, and finds this thing, makes a huge amount of money off it. Everybody in his circle gets indicted. They all go to prison. All of this stuff gets confiscated. So there's someone who's in his circle who's invested in this Omega Trust. Her name is Shani Goodwin. She reinvents herself by calling herself Dove of Oneness. She's living in a trailer park in Yelm, Washington. Now, Yelm is this new age hotbed. It's where the Ramtha cult is. All kinds of sort of new agey, fraudy stuff is going on there. She starts saying that she is not only plugged into Omega, she's plugged into this other thing called Nasara. And this is another real economic proposal. It's a very long story, but this guy printed up this economic proposal that was going to do away with income tax and debt, and everybody was going to be on a level playing field. She takes this and turns it into this pie in the sky prosperity program where the federal government was going to release trillions of dollars to the people at just the right time. And there's angels and demons and aliens, and 9/11 happens to stop the release of the prosperity money. That's where the papers are being stored on the 97th floor of the Twin Towers. The first 9/11 conspiracy theory is Dove of Oneness, saying that the planes were sent to destroy all of the Nasara paperwork. This goes on for years. It's actually still going. There are people who still believe that Nasara is going to happen. So some of the Nasara people eventually start getting sucked into QAnon, because it's very similar. It's the all-knowing guru, the great event. There's always something that's about to happen. But with something like Omega or Nasara, you're committing fraud. You're telling people that a great investment is going to pay off for them if you give them enough money. There's nothing inherently fraudulent with QAnon. So you can keep Q going indefinitely by just promising that awesome stuff is going to happen, but it's not financially based. So it's all a kind of a ladder that leads from one scam to the next scam, and then you get to Q, and then Q will lead to the next thing and the next thing.
Wow.
That's an extremely long-winded explanation.
No, that's fantastic. And I think that reminded me a bit of, I heard about the Nasara conspiracies on actually the Alex Jones InfoWars.
Sure.
He talked about that a lot. And what I learned is that he actually, the way he accumulated over $150 million from selling testosterone boosters, from protein powder, from, basically targeted at young men.
Yeah.
So that's how he kept the empire and how he keeps the empire going. So this kind of brings me to the next thing about QAnon is I thought it just targeted young men, to get them maybe on this medication and this Ferris wheel of what you'd call a prosperity scam. But
sure,
you said it also appeals to baby boomers and yoga moms. How?
I know it's mind blowing. It people who would never vote for Trump, who would never listen to Alex Jones, who would never share an anti-Semitic meme, who think that they're totally above all that. But a lot of these sort of older conservative Americans, they're kind of cut off from their families and friends. A lot of them are retired. Their kids are out of the house. They don't have much to do. And you're looking around for the reasons why maybe your life didn't go in the way that you wanted it to go. Somebody kept you down. Somebody made sure that you didn't prosper. And when you connect that with this kind of decades-old, deep-seated hatred of the Clintons, and then you fast forward a little bit to Obama, and Obama was really the president who broke all this stuff open into the mainstream. I mean, you had these openly racist conspiracy theories about his birth certificate, whether he's a secret Muslim, and a lot of these people started to get into that stuff. And Q really appeals to a lot of those same people. So these are people who would never go on 4chan, but maybe they kind of like Alex Jones. Oh, they'll watch InfoWars. Like, oh, he kind of says some of this stuff that I've been thinking for a long time. And in December of 2017, two of the big early Q evangelists went on InfoWars, and they made a pitch for retired Americans with military experience to join the fight against the deep state and to help decode these posts. So you had an influx of older Americans who are already not very good at discerning truth from fiction on the internet. There's a bunch of studies that say boomers are much more prone to sharing fake news stories on Facebook, falling into some of these scams. So these are people who are really kind of primed for this. They're not like 4chan edgelord people, but they like, they're into conservative politics, and they like Alex Jones, they like stuff like that. And then during the pandemic, it jumps to that other side because you have the same thing. You have people who are forced inside. A lot of them have lost their jobs or don't really have a work routine from working at home, cut off from your friend groups, cut off from your church groups. You're isolated and you're alone, and you're trying to figure out what the hell just happened and who is to blame for it. Who did this to us? And movements like QAnon are perfect for answering those questions, especially when you're already kind of into some fringy new age alternative medicine stuff. So if you are anti-5G, if you're anti-vaccine, if you're anti-Bill Gates, you join a Facebook group about one of those things, and it starts pushing you toward QAnon. It starts pushing you toward Save the Children, because it's the algorithm saying, hey, you like this, you'll like that. So very quickly, you have this merging of all these different worlds to form a vast conspiracy theory where everything is on the table. You just pick and choose the parts of it that you like the most.
Yeah, it seemed the algorithms are it's all about keeping you on the platform as long as possible. And I'm always very angry about the ethic. There's no ethics behind any of it. And it requires, I had a cult expert on the podcast about like 2 weeks ago, and he talked about how we need to be smart, very smart consumers, or you will fall prey to this sort of, and especially like what you were just saying, they need someone to blame, especially during the pandemic. Well, again, I just want to say like that's kind of the same after the First World War in Germany, the economy, the atomization of society, it draws the same sort of, and the economy, they say we need to blame someone. There comes Adolf Hitler. So is this movement that, the storm is upon us, is this just the same old conspiracy wrapped in a new QAnon label, or is this just something humans are constantly drawn into conspiracies when things aren't going their way in life?
It's definitely a repackaging of very durable conspiracy tropes. You talk about the end of the First World War and the idea that it was the Jews who betrayed us. The German fighting man never lost a battle. No Allied soldier ever set foot on our soil. They stabbed us in the back. And then you keep repeating that over and over and over again. And something like Q works very much the same. Here are the people who did this to you. Here are the people who want to inject you with vaccines that don't work, who stole our election, who bombarded us with satanic imagery, and they've been getting away with it decade after decade, century after century, and now we finally stop it. And Trump is the outsider who can stop it. So you have very well-worn, very useful conspiracy tropes that have worked over and over and over again. But Trump is the guy to execute that. So you had sort of the right kind of movement with the right figurehead distributed in the right kind of way. It was a combination that really feels very novel, but the parts of it are very old.
They're very, and just to Trump really quickly, you said in 2017 he dropped a note saying the storm is coming, right? The storm is coming, and without without knowing what he was saying,
he had no idea.
Is it so? I think Donald Trump though is a bit more like nefarious and not smart as an intellectual, but he knows how to get to power and he knows how to rile up debate and connect with these sorts of people very well. Are you saying, does Donald Trump essentially use as a tool in this movement, or was he very conscious about, how this is going to help catapult me into power? It's hard to decipher, really.
Yeah, it's always hard to tell what he's thinking, and I try not to, because who the hell knows, and certainly not him. My general impression, I think a lot of the people who do this work, is that this calm before the storm remark was just like stuff. I mean, he talks. He says things that have no relation to reality. But if you are looking to have a good time on 4chan, and you already love Trump, Trump's your guy. Trump's been your guy for years. You're going to use him as this sort of central pivot of this movement that you can get some popularity, maybe start getting some merchandise out there, get some videos out there. But eventually he figures this out, or the people around him figure this out, and he starts retweeting Q believers. Now, the mechanism for how stuff on Twitter got in front of Trump is still very mysterious. We don't quite know. Maybe he's just sort of surfing around, but he's famously tech illiterate, but he's got a very sharp social media team around him. So my sort of impression, I don't know this for sure, but it makes a lot of sense, is that the people around him saw that this was starting to happen, and they're like, oh, let's get this in front of him. These people love him. He can do no wrong in their eyes, and he can throw stuff out there that most people are not going to understand. But these people who love him are going to go, yep, that's our guy. And he's not really doing anything that he said he was going to do, but he's going to at some point once the deep state leaves him alone. So I think he kind of figured out, hey, these people love me and I can use that.
Yeah. And seeing now that he's like, aside from him, I know you talked about how they're digital soldiers. They refer to themselves as digital soldiers, these QAnon believers. And instead of the movement disappearing, I think we're in agreement that the dissolving of QAnon is going to make these people say, we need to now take physical action and get offline, as opposed to retreating back under their rocks. Correct? Right. Do you predict that this is going to get worse, or is it been squashed?
Oh, it's going to get worse. And I think for a long time, Q really was an online movement. There, the people gathered in places like Twitter and Reddit and whatever, but you didn't have Q meetups. A Q gathering was like 8 people at an Applebee's. They had a rally in DC in summer of 2019. I think 150 people were there, and probably a third of them were journalists. So this was not a big this was an online movement. This wasn't people getting together, but as the pandemic started to recede and you started to have these big conferences going on, then the Q people started coming out. And of course, they went to the Trump rallies before that, but that's an event based around Trump. Now, practically every week, you've got one of these rallies going on, which is COVID is a hoax, election was stolen, cancel culture is coming for you, border security, Second Amendment, Supreme Court, all of this stuff is all wrapped up together, and QAnon's a huge part of that. And this is every week. Sometimes there are competing rallies in the same city in the same weekend. You know, Mike Flynn will speak at the one conference at 3:00, then he'll pop over and speak at the other conference at 6:00. So this is a movement that has found strength getting together offline. And what we're now seeing is this tidal wave of anger being directed at federal law enforcement for what's going on with Trump. You know, this FBI search of Mar-a-Lago has really galvanized a lot of these people. And my fear is that we could see another version of the storm if Trump is indicted. I think a Trump indictment is going to activate a lot of people to go, we got to stop this. We have to put an end to this. The time for talking is done. Now the time for action. And you have a sort of a movement full of potential Timothy McVeighs, if it gets as bad as it could.
Wow, there's the big conundrum that, and I'm sure they're thinking about that, accounting for that with their decision if they indict or not. Because on the one hand, if you don't indict him, then he can continue to right. spew off to millions of followers. I think that you kind of have to squash these movements head on, and yeah. there will, as in the Daniel Day-Lewis, there will be blood.
Yeah.
But there will be arrests too, because if it manifests to violence. But you're right, the Timothy McVeigh he was also spawned on the same conspiracy that the government's trying to take away
yeah.
our guns.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
here we are again. They're saying the same. So that's it's just interesting to me. This we're kind of rehashing the same conspiracies over and over throughout humanity. And there just doesn't seem to be there's no way to stop this without indictments or the shutdown of the internet. Like, is that another solution? Or, I mean, we're only going to go deeper into the internet.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, is you can't shut down the internet. We depend on the internet for everything we do. And what's so interesting about these movements is that they are really good at adapting to new technology. The earliest days of the internet saw conspiracy theorists gathering on Usenet and BBSs and Yahoo groups. And mm-hmm. before that, it was shortwave radio, and then they would print their own pamphlets. So this stuff has always been with us, and in particular, this very right-wing idea of a sort of leftist Jewish Bolshevik super government of insiders, the New World Order, the Trilateral Commission, you call it a million different names. It's always been the same kind of thing, that there's a pyramid, and at the top of it are this small group of controllers who dictate everything in our lives. And that's always going to be with us, because we're always kind of paranoid about power and about the idea that someone is getting one over on us, and that somebody's exploiting us, and we're just giving it a different name this week. So unfortunately, this is human nature. This is the way we are wired, to seek order in chaos, to seek patterns in noise. And there are people who are very good at exploiting that and very good at monetizing that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I wanted to, because I was reading one of your other articles on the Daily Dot. I think you maybe put it out 2 months ago, and so about David Icke.
Yeah.
And so I was actually I fell into his sort of videos for maybe a 3-week period of time.
Yeah.
Where I was like, oh my God, this reptilian conspiracy, this is great. Like, I'm a big alien believer. Yeah. But then I got to a video where he said something very anti-Semitic about I think Jewish people starting the World War II.
Yes.
He said something, and then it snapped me out. I said, oh my God. I said, have I been listening to just like a neo-Nazi? And then it hit me too. I'm like, well, so they lured me in through reptilian talk and aliens. And now here I am. If I was in a more vulnerable place, I could begin to, me as a Jewish person, begin to start worshiping a guy who is a Holocaust denier. So I'm just curious, how does the reptilian fall into this sort of the anti-Semitic conspiracy? Because I didn't see that. And then you connected the dots so well.
Yeah. So David Icke, I mean, he's really one of the godfathers of that kind of thing. And you're exposed to him at first, and you're like, oh, he's kind of a buffoon. He's kind of an idiot. Yeah. And his turquoise shirts, and he's screaming about, rise up. But you find that one thing in him, we go, oh, that's kind of interesting. And you start to watch more videos, and the videos are really well done. And you keep going and going and going. And there's so much content with these guys that you never run out. And I mean, good for you for hearing that one thing and going, nope, I'm done. I'm out. Not for me. And a lot of people do not, they hear that and they go, oh, okay, because it ties in with the stuff that you've been hearing about Jews running finance, running the media, running the government. The reptilian thing, reptiles and sort of reptoid aliens have been a part of popular culture for a long time. You go back to the Conan the Barbarian stories. You go to something like the miniseries with the humans that pull their blizzard masks off. But I kind of transformed it into they're controlling our world. They're this bloodline of royalty is actually infused with lizard DNA, and they're fighting this other alien faction. They're using us as cattle in their war, and it's very complicated. The more details you load onto a conspiracy theory, the more plausible it sounds. Right. So he turns this into a mythology, and it's sort of interesting, and it's kind of fun, and it's really bizarre. And you start digging in, you see a video of like a grainy Queen Elizabeth, like twisting her head, and her eyes like go flicker a bit, and you go, oh, what? Wait a minute, I think David, I may be right about her. And you don't mean to do it. Nobody sits down and goes, I am going to turn myself into an anti-Semite today. That's just not how it goes. I mean, that phrase, like, nobody joins a cult. You join a movement full of people who, are saying things you believe in, are now your new friends, and then the cult stuff comes later. So and the people like that, they're really good at easing you into this stuff. And then by the time the really, really dark stuff hits you, it just doesn't register that it's any weirder than the stuff that you've already seen before.
Yes, that's the whole trick with the both the QAnon and the Reptilian. They're they're genius marketers of also offering you free content. And it's so easy to watch, and then they can indoctrinate you to start believing things that go against your own like true core ideological belief systems. So that to me is fascinating, and at the same time disturbing, because at a certain point, like conspiracy turns to real life violence, as we've seen throughout history. So, and here we are again. There's 20%. Like, I'll just go back to that statistic, and I'm curious from as you continue to investigate this, throughout your book, and the movement's still going on. Yeah. What I'm trying to ask is, how do you see this throughout history? These movements die down, then they rise back up into violence. And I still don't think in America we have reached the moment of apex. Like, even January 6th, to me, it wasn't the end. That wasn't the big moment. So like you're saying, maybe you've already said it, but you see is the storm coming, or is it past?
Well, I think it's definitely still coming. And you're right that these movements are cyclical. They're this kind of sort of anti-government, anti-federal law enforcement fervor. It comes up and it dies down. It was bad during the Clinton years. And then it wasn't so bad during the George W. Bush years. And then it comes back during the Obama years. And some of it depends on who the president is. Some of it just depends on sort of social trends at the time. But I think right now we're in a really, really dangerous movement, or a really, really dangerous time in this movement, because so many of these people have transitioned from this being a conspiracy theory that they're just interested in to this is their life. And it's not necessarily even Q. It's, a lot of these people will say, I'm not one of those crazy Q people. I don't think Hillary Clinton drinks the blood of babies during occult rituals. I just think that the federal government is persecuting Donald Trump, and if the time comes, I'm going to do something about it. So it's that every single person who is plugged into one of these extremist movements is a potential insurgent. You just don't know who they are. And that's one of the things that makes parsing out a lot of this social media so difficult. You never know whether somebody is just ranting or venting, or whether they're kind of a violent, unstable person, but they're not going to do anything about it. But then there's that one who's like, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm going in. We saw that with the FBI guy, the guy who attacked the FBI headquarters in Cincinnati. Right. Had a Twitter account full of conspiracy theories. Then he went on Truth Social, and he's saying really, really violent, bloodlusty kind of stuff that should get you banned and ideally a welfare check from the police. But on a place like that, you just don't know, and especially when you have a more quote free speech environment where anything goes, you have no idea what's real and what's not. So it's a sort of a low-level insurgency where you never know who the actual enemy is. And it's very frustrating and it's very dangerous. And I can see for law enforcement, it's really difficult to deal with that.
And the more you push back on them, the more you push back on this hate speech, the more it actually fuels their movement to believe that there's something called, techno censorship, right?
Right.
They're the techno victimhood.
Right.
Is what it's called. They feel even now not only victimized by the government in real life, but online as well. So it pushes you to a breaking point. Now there is a certain element of what's so interesting about these movements is that, there's let's say something like the OxyContin. I watched Dope Sick and I saw the FDA labeling. They created a new label for OxyContin called, less addictive.
Yes.
And this led to, millions being addicted. So in a certain sense, the FDA there was proven a bit corrupt with their labeling. And they use these events to help. And you can't argue with some of the points, but then, so there's no truth to any of these statements, but there is kernels of they're tapping into popular beliefs about government as well. So it's just hard to disprove this stuff.
Right. It's hard to disprove it because, of course, the burden is not on me to disprove it. The burden is on the believer to prove it. But they don't see themselves that way. They think the burden of proof lies with everybody else and that they are the correct ones. And of course, one of the things that I get all the time is, so you don't believe that conspiracies are real? No, there are real conspiracies. Like the whole thing with the FDA, that's exactly it. The cigarette companies saying, tobacco doesn't hurt you, tobacco doesn't cause cancer. They all conspired to do that. Conspiracies involving assassinations, political attempts, smear campaigns, that stuff's all real. And, somebody's going to say, you trust the government completely? Of course not. I don't trust the government completely. I don't trust the finance industry completely. No one should. That kind of blanket trust is not earned. But it's thinking that everyone's out to get me. Everyone's trying to destroy me. They're being financed by a higher up group of Kabbalists who are controlling the world. They're poisoning us, then they're selling us cures, they're suppressing free energy. We would have a beautiful world if not for these people. And these people have taken many forms, Catholics, Freemasons, Jews, the Bilderberg group, the Democrats, Obama, Soros. There's always somebody who's going to be doing better than you and who you think is going to have more power over you, and you want to fight back. And movements like Q and militia movements, extremist movements, they give you ways to push back at the people who you are being told are keeping you down.
Well, that's why I think it's very important that we continue to uphold the truth, especially in this time where disinformation and the truth are very hard to disseminate between. And so I really appreciate your journalism and your book, The Storm is Upon Us, because it's more of a, not to get into biblical terms, but it feels more like a prophecy, and we gotta be on the lookout for it.
Yeah, and prophecy is powerful. Prophecy has a real power over people, and people don't want to give them up. And that's why people don't leave movements like Q, because the next victory is always just around the corner. And if you walk away now, well, then you wasted all your time and it was all for nothing. And of course, with something like Q, you've probably alienated your friends, your family. You don't have anywhere else to go. You just have these people who are on the same journey with you. And it doesn't matter at a certain point if the prophecies fail, if you're being lied to all the time, you just stick with it because it has to come true. And it leads you nowhere. It leads you to just a life of misery.
Yeah, you're pot committed. Like in poker, you you should fold, but you can't.
But you've just put too many chips in already. You just got to see how it plays out.
Man, well, I'm curious. Maybe more people will walk away, but hopefully more don't fall into the trap. But again, we'll keep staying on this. So, Mike, thank you so much for coming on today. You blew my mind.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, all right. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and subscribe to the show. Help spread the word about uncovering the truth by giving us a 5-star review and sharing the show with a friend. We're available on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you for listening, and as always, I will continue to uncover the truth. The Uncovering the Truth theme song was created and produced by Pokari.